The first thing he saw was shame turned into rope and nailed to an old wooden fence. Her arms were stretched high, her feet forced apart, and the rope bit deep enough to make her whole body tremble under the summer sun. Her breath came out thin and broken, like she was afraid even air might punish her. He stepped in behind her from the wrong angle, at the wrong second. Close. Too close. And for a breath too long. Nothing about it looked right. Didn't look like help. She couldn't cover herself. She couldn't run. She could only shake and stare at the sky like it was the only thing left that hadn't touched her yet. She was young. Too young to be left like this in the open. Too young to look like she'd already stopped believing anyone decent was coming. Owen McCall reined his horse hard and jumped down before the animal had fully stopped. He didn't shout, didn't ask questions. Out here. When you saw something like that, you moved first and thought later. He stepped behind the fence, close enough to smell dust, sweat, and fear. Close enough to feel how badly she was shaking. He crouched low behind her back, careful not to let her weight drop, one arm sliding in to hold her steady so the ropes wouldn't tear her joints apart. That was when she felt him. The pressure shifted. Her body lifted just enough for the rope to loosen a breath, and the wide brim of his hat brushed against her by accident, pushed forward as he leaned in to reach the knot. Her voice came out in a broken whisper, sharp with panic. Your head. Don't. It wasn't loud, it wasn't clear, but it was enough to sound wrong. Wrong enough that if anyone had been watching, it would have looked like something terrible was about to happen behind that fence. Owen froze, not because of fear, because he understood exactly what she thought he was doing. He pulled his head back at once, lifted his hat away, and held his hands where she could feel them steady and sure. He spoke low, slow, the way you talk to a spooked horse or a wounded calf. Easy now. I'm cutting you loose. But fear doesn't listen to reason. Fear only remembers pain. Her legs trembled harder, the rope creaking against old wood, her breath hitching like she was bracing for something worse than the sun and the dust and the shame of being tied up like an animal. Owen swallowed and went back to work, careful now, slower, keeping his body angled away even though it made the knots harder to reach. If he slipped, she'd drop. If he rushed, she'd scream. Either way, this could turn ugly fast. He didn't know her name, didn't know why she'd been left like this, didn't know who had done it. All he knew was that nobody deserved to be tied to a fence and forgotten. Out here, you learn something early. Cruelty is easy. It doesn't take talent. Kindness takes guts, because it always risked being misunderstood. A gust of hot Kansas wind rattled the boards. Somewhere off toward the road, a horse snorted, and for just a heartbeat, Owen had the sick feeling that someone might be watching, seeing only what they wanted to see, a grown man behind a young woman. Ropes, silence, a half-spoken plea. Your head. Don't. The first knot finally gave a little under his fingers. Before we go any further, let me say this plain and honest. This story has been gathered from old accounts, retold, and shaped with care. Some details have been added to bring clearer lessons, deeper meaning, and a stronger sense of what life felt like back then. All images used to illustrate this story are created by AI to help carry the emotion and weight of the moment. If this kind of story isn't for you, it's all right to step away, get some rest, and take care of your health. But if you stay and something in this tale speaks to you, leave a comment and let me know. I've got more stories like this, waiting to be told for folks who still listen. The rope loosened another inch. She gasped as feeling rushed back into her hands, pain sharp enough to make her cry out. Owen held her steady from behind, eyes fixed on the knot, jaw tight, every muscle aware of how this must look to anyone who came around that corner. He could already picture it. A whisper in a saloon, a glance held too long, a lie growing legs. Out here, a man's reputation could hang just as fast as a body. Her shoulders sagged as one wrist slipped free. She slumped back against him before she could stop herself. Exhausted, dizzy, barely standing, Owen caught her without thinking. And somewhere beyond the fence, beyond the heat shimmer and the buzzing flies, a single choice was being made. Not by him. Not by her. but by the town that hadn't even arrived yet. So here's the question you ought to sit with before we go on. When a man is seen in the worst possible light, and the truth is quieter than the lie, does doing the right thing still save him? Or does it only give the crowd a better reason to destroy him? Owen kept his arm firm around her waist, not tight in a way that would scare her, just steady enough that she didn't fall and crack her head on the hard ground. The second, her free wrist dropped. The blood rushed back into her hand and she winced like she'd been burned. Pain does that. It makes a person mean without wanting to be. She tried to pull away from him, then nearly collapsed when her legs buckled. Owen shifted his feet in the dust and took more of her weight from behind. He hated how it looked. He hated how it felt. A young woman tied up like livestock and an older man holding her up from the backside of a fence. If the devil wanted a photograph to ruin a man, this was it. He didn't say much. Men who talk too much in a moment like this usually say the wrong thing. He just worked the knot on her other wrist, slower now, keeping his hat back and his head away so she wouldn't panic again. Her breathing steadied in little pieces, not calm but less wild. Her eyes kept darting toward the yard, toward the quiet road, toward the corner of the building like she expected somebody to come storming out any second. Owen followed her look. The blacksmith shop sat close by, door shut, an anvil shadow inside, tools hanging in the dark. The place smelled like old coal and iron, even with the forge cold. That smell was familiar to Owen, because every ranch depended on a smith sooner or later. Horseshoes, nails, chains, hinges. A good blacksmith could keep a spread alive. Bad one could bury it. He got the second wrist loose. She sagged again, and this time she let out a small sound that wasn't fear. It was relief trying to come out, but not knowing how. Owen eased her down so her boots touched the ground, then kept his hand at her elbow while she tested her legs. That was when he saw the marks, not the rope burns. Those were bad enough. He saw older bruises at the edge of her sleeves, faint but real. He saw a small scrape on her cheek that looked like a hand had shoved her into wood. He'd seen men do that kind of work before, then smile in public like saints. She swallowed and tried to stand straight. Like pride could hold her up when her body couldn't. Her lips trembled as she looked at him. Then she looked away fast, embarrassed. Owen cleared his throat, keeping his voice soft. He asked one simple thing. Are you hurt bad? She nodded, then shook her head, then nodded again. It wasn't an answer. It was a storm. He didn't press her. Instead, he did what an older man does when he's trying to help without making it worse. He moved his hands away from her body, took one step back, and turned his shoulders a little so she didn't feel cornered. Then he pointed at the shop with his chin. Where's your husband? That question changed her face. Fear came back hard, not the fear of rope. The fear of what happens after the rope. She whispered that he was gone, out on an errand, not far, not long, and that he'd be back. She didn't say his name yet, like naming him might summon him. Owen glanced at the road again. Summer heat made the distance wobble like the land itself was drunk. He listened. No wagon creak. No hoofbeats close, just flies and wind and that awful quiet that comes before trouble. He offered her water from his canteen, holding it out at arm's length so she could take it without feeling touched. She hesitated, then drank like she hadn't had a sip in hours. A little spilled down her chin, and she wiped it quick. Ashamed of needing anything? Owen didn't shame her. He'd seen tough men cry over a broken horse. He'd seen women keep standing with a cracked rib. Need wasn't weakness. It was life. While she drank, Owen noticed the rope ends. The knots weren't sloppy. They were tight, deliberate, the kind a man used when he didn't want something slipping free. That wasn't jealousy in a fit. That was control. And then Owen saw something else that made his stomach tighten. There was a short length of rope with a clean cut, not frayed, cut with a blade. That meant whoever tied her had time, and tools, and patience. A sound came from the far side of the fence line, a quick scuff of boots in dry grass. Owen turned his head, and he caught just the tail end of it. A kid, or a skinny young man, slipping away behind the corner of the building. Owen's first instinct was to call out. His second instinct was wiser. If somebody was watching, then somebody was already building a story. He looked back at her. She was watching their same corner, and her eyes widened like she knew exactly who it was. A runner, a mouth, the kind of person who could take a moment and sell it for a free drink in town. Owen felt the ground shift under his boots, not from an earthquake, but from the weight of what was coming. If that boy reached Dodge City first, Owen could be finished before he ever spoke a full sentence. He made a decision that wasn't brave, just necessary. He wasn't going to walk her into town himself. Not like this. That would look like a kidnapping to a crowd that didn't ask questions. He needed a place that would make sense. A place where a woman could be seen as a patient, not a prize. He asked her name. She told him, Clara May. 2 words, soft as dust. He told her his, Owen McCall, and he said it plain so she'd remember it if she had to repeat it. Then he pointed toward the road that led into Dodge City, and he told her they were going to Doc Ellison, not the saloon, not the jailhouse yet. The doctor first. She hesitated, looking past him like she was weighing whether the doctor was safer than her own home. That pause told Owen everything. Owen offered her his coat, and she took it after a second, wrapping it around herself like it was the first kindness she'd been allowed in a long time. He helped her walk, but he kept his hands careful, staying to her side now, not behind her, not giving the world another picture to twist. They made it a few steps before Clara May spoke again, voice small. He'll say it was you. Owen didn't answer right away, but he just nodded once, like he already knew, because men like her husband didn't just tie ropes. They tied stories, and in Dodge City, stories could build a gallows faster than carpenters. They reached his horse, and Owen looked back at the empty blacksmith shop, the cold forge, the hanging tools. He'd come for simple work, iron and nails, and a small order for his ranch. Now he was leaving with a wounded girl, a bad feeling, and the certainty that the whole town was about to hear the ugliest version of him. Then, from down the road, faint but real, came the sound of hooves and metal clinking, like a hammer striking something hard. Owen tightened his jaw, because it sounded like the blacksmith was coming home. Owen didn't wait to see who was riding in. He didn't have to. That sound of iron knocking iron was burned into his memory from a lifetime around ranch work. It was a blacksmith sound, and it was coming closer. He helped Clara May onto his horse first, slow and careful. Letting her lean on the saddle horn while he steadied her, she moved stiff, like every step hurt more than she wanted to admit. He swung up after her, keeping space, keeping his hands where anyone could see them if someone came around the bend. They rode toward Dodge City at a measured pace, not fast enough to look like they were running, not slow enough to invite trouble. The road shimmered under the sun, and dust clung to everything. Owen felt eyes on his back even when there weren't any. That was how it always started. A feeling first, then a voice, then a crowd. They reached Doc Ellison's place without incident, but the quiet didn't last. Quiet never does. The doc took Clara May inside without questions, which told Owen something right away. This wasn't the first time a woman had come through that door, hurt and afraid. Owen waited outside, hat in his hands, staring at the ground like a schoolboy, listening to the muffled sounds of water and careful movement. When the doc came back out, his mouth was set hard. He didn't say much. He didn't have to. Owen thanked him and asked what he owed. The doc shook his head and told him to worry about staying alive through the afternoon. That was the second warning. Owen stepped back out onto the street, and that was when he felt it, the shift. The way air changes when a story has already arrived before you. Men had gathered near the saloon, not in a tight group yet, but close enough to share glances. A few stopped talking when they saw him. One spat in the dirt. Owen walked anyway. He kept his pace even, boots steady, shoulders relaxed. He had learned long ago that fear looks guilty to people who are already looking for a reason. As he passed the hitching rail, a voice rose behind him, loud enough to carry. That's him. Owen didn't turn. Turning gives a man too much power. Inside the saloon, the air was thick with sweat and old whiskey. The piano played something lazy and wrong. A couple of cowhands laughed too loud, then stopped when Owen came through the door. He ordered water. Not whiskey. That mattered to him. even if it didn't matter to anyone else. That was when Silas Crow walked in. The blacksmith filled the doorway like he owned it. Big shoulders, strong hands, a face that knew how to look concerned in public. Silas didn't look at Owen right away. He looked around the room, letting the silence build, letting the men notice him. Then he spoke, calm and measured, like a man who had nothing to hide. He asked if anyone had seen his wife. The room shifted. Someone answered before Owen could. Said she'd been found tied up. Said an older rancher had been with her. Silas turned then. His eyes landed on Owen like he'd just spotted a rattlesnake under his boot. He didn't shout. He didn't swing. He did something worse. He sighed. He said he had only stepped out for work. He said he came back to hear his wife had been hurt. He said he was grateful the town looked out for its own. Then he said one sentence that landed harder than a punch. He said the man was behind her. That was all it took. Men in the saloon leaned forward. A chair scraped. Someone cursed under their breath. Owen felt the moment stretch thin. He could explain. He could tell the truth, slow and careful. But truth moves slow, and anger runs. And a running lie doesn't need proof. It only needs company. That's how decent men get pulled into bad deeds. One shared belief at a time. A hand shoved his shoulder. Another grabbed his coat. Owen raised his palms, trying to keep it from boiling over. But the shove came again, harder this time. The first punch wasn't his. It never is. When it came, Owen reacted on instinct. He turned, blocked, and drove his weight into the man's chest and sending him stumbling back into a table. Bottles crashed. Someone yelled. The fight was on. Owen didn't look for blood, and he looked for space. He moved like a man who knew how to fall without breaking and how to stand without bragging. He took a hit to the ribs that stole his breath, and he gave one back that sent a younger man spinning. Chairs tipped. The piano stopped. Dust rose from the floorboards. Then a voice cut through it all, sharp and practiced. "That's enough." Marshal Harper stood in the doorway, hand on his gun, eyes cold. He didn't care who started it. He cared who finished it. The room stilled. Owen straightened slowly. Chest tight, jaw clenched. He hadn't drawn his weapon. That mattered. Silas stood off to the side, untouched, watching like a man watching a fire he'd set from a safe distance. The marshal looked at Owen and told him to step outside, not under arrest, not free, just out of the way. Owen went. On the street, the crowd had grown. Word had traveled fast. Faces were hard now. Judging, the marshal told Owen he was going to keep him close for his own good. Said Dodge City didn't need a rope thrown over misunderstanding. Silas spoke then, loud enough for everyone. He said justice shouldn't wait. Owen met his eyes for the first time, and in that look, Owen saw it. Not grief, not anger. Relief. The kind of relief a man feels when the story is going exactly the way he planned. The marshal moved Owen toward the jailhouse, hand firm on his arm, not rough, protective. As they walked, Owen heard the murmurs grow. Behind her, tied up, old enough to know better. Owen said nothing, because he knew something worse was coming. When a man wants you gone, he doesn't need to prove you did wrong. He only needs the town to believe it. And Silas Crow had already decided how this was going to end. Owen spent the first hour in the Dodge City jail listening to the town breathe. It wasn't quiet breathing. It was the kind that came in short pulls, like a crowd leaning forward without knowing it yet. The cell smelled of iron, sweat, and old wood. The bars were thick, scarred by men who had waited behind them and learned how thin luck really was. Owen sat on the bench with his elbows on his knees, hat resting beside him, and stared at the floor like it might explain how a simple stop for iron had turned into this. Marshal Harper hadn't locked him in hard. That told Owen something. The marshal wasn't sure. Not about guilt, not about innocence, just sure enough that the town was hungry. Harper came back after a while and leaned against the bars. He spoke low, so the men outside wouldn't hear. He told Owen he didn't believe in rope first and questions later. He also told him that belief didn't stop a crowd once it got moving. Owen nodded. He already knew. The marshal asked him one thing, why he'd been at the fence. Owen told him the truth, plain and steady, without trying to dress it up. He said he found a woman tied up and cut her loose from behind because that was the only way to keep her from collapsing. He said the hat was an accident. He said he never touched her the wrong way. Harper listened, didn't interrupt, didn't judge. When Owen finished, the marshal sighed and rubbed his jaw. He said the problem wasn't the story. It was the timing. By then, Silas Crow had already been through 2 saloons. Not shouting, not threatening, just talking. Talking was worse. Because a fist leaves bruises you can point to. A rumor leaves bruises nobody can see. And those are the ones that change a life. While Owen sat behind bars, Silas was out there letting the town build the picture for him. A good husband. A hard-working blacksmith. A wife found tied up. An older rancher behind her. Silas didn't need to lie much. He only needed to leave out what mattered. Later that afternoon, Doc Ellison came by. He stood with his hat in his hands like a man at a funeral and asked to see Owen alone. The marshal hesitated, then stepped away. The doc didn't smile. He told Owen the girl was stable. Sore, bruised, shaken. Then he told Owen something else. The marks on her wrists weren't fresh only. Some were older, and that settled something deep in Owen's gut. It wasn't proof. But it was truth. The doc said Clara May hadn't wanted to say much. Fear had a way of sealing a person up, but she'd said one thing that mattered. She said her husband tied knots like a man tying down cattle, not like a man losing his temper. Owen leaned back against the wall and closed his eyes. That was the sound he had heard in his head since the fence. Not rage, routine after the doc left. Owen noticed a man lingering outside the jail, a man with clean boots and a polite posture, not a ranch hand, not a drifter, one of the town men who liked to think of himself as respectable. That man spoke quietly with Silas not far from the jailhouse door. Owen couldn't hear the words, but he saw the nods, saw the way Silas's shoulders eased. That was when Owen understood something else. Silas wasn't alone. A blacksmith could do a lot, but he couldn't move cattle or sell them without help. He couldn't turn a town this fast without someone pushing from the other side. The sun slid lower, and the heat didn't ease. If anything, it made tempers worse. Voices gathered outside, not shouting yet, just gathering. Owen stood and walked to the bars. He saw faces he recognized, men he'd traded with, men he'd shared coffee with on the trail. They didn't look at him now. Silas stood a little apart, arms crossed, head bowed like a man burdened by grief. He glanced up just once and met Owen's eyes. There was no anger there, only certainty. That look chilled Owen more than any threat, because it told him Silas believed the town would finish this for him. As evening crept in, the marshal came back, jaw tight. He said he was trying to slow things down. He said people were talking about making an example. He said Owen needed something solid, not just a story. Owen asked about the rope. The marshal frowned. Owen explained the knots again. Slower this time. Explained how they were explained the clean-cut end. Explained the patience it took. The marshal listened harder now. Owen went on. He said a man who tied rope like that wasn't acting out of sudden anger. He was acting out of habit. Control. The marshal didn't answer right away. Then he asked Owen why he'd come to the blacksmith in the first place. That question opened another door. Owen told him about the order. Not nails. Not shoes. A brand piece. A custom one. The marshal raised an eyebrow. Owen said a man could steal cattle easy enough, but turning stolen cattle into honest-looking cattle took iron. It took a blacksmith. That made the marshal straighten, because Dodge City had been seeing cattle pass through that didn't smell right on paper. Nothing proven, just wrong. Outside, a shout went up, then another. The crowd was no longer waiting. The marshal put his hand on the bars and leaned in. He said if Owen had proof, now was the time to find it. Because once night fell, the town would stop listening, as if summoned by that thought. A soft knock came from the back door of the jail. The marshal turned. Doc Ellison stepped in from the warm night air, hat low, eyes tired. He didn't come alone. Clara May was not far behind him, staying in the shadow like she still didn't trust the night. Doc held up something wrapped in cloth. He unwrapped it slow under the lantern. A small piece of iron, a brand head. Doc said Clara May had found it earlier, tucked behind coal sacks in the shop, and she'd handed it to him because she knew her husband had eyes everywhere. Then Doc added one more thing, and it landed like a rock. He said she knew where the rest of it was hidden, too. Doc Ellison held the small piece of iron like it might burn him. Up close, Owen could see it better through the bars. It was heavy for its size, cold. Shaped with purpose, not a horseshoe, but not a nail. A brand head. The marshal took it from Doc's hand and turned it slowly under the lantern light. The marshal looked toward the front of the jail. The crowd was still out there, tired but stubborn, and night made men mean. He didn't unlock the cell. Not yet. He said Owen would stay inside until dawn. He said the town would be half asleep then, worn out from heat and whiskey, and that was the only time they could move without lighting the fuse again. The symbol cut into it was clean and sharp, not worn from honest use. This thing hadn't been working cattle for years. It had been waiting. Doc spoke quietly, steady in a way that made Owen's chest tighten. He said Clara May had found it wrapped in cloth, hidden behind sacks of coal in the shop. She'd given it to him because she was done risking her life alone. She said her husband never used it in front of her. She said he told her not to touch it, not to ask, and never to mention it. That was enough. The marshal's face changed, not anger yet, concern. He said he had seen that mark before, not on paper. On hides that came through town fast and left faster. Cattle that did not belong to the men selling them. The crowd outside the jail was louder now. Boots scuffed. Voices climbed over each other. Someone shouted that it was time. The marshal made a decision that could get him run out of office or worse. He decided to wait, then strike when the town was too tired to turn into a mob. Before dawn, when the sky was still gray and the air finally cooled, the marshal came back. He unlocked the cell. Owen stepped out slow, not rushing, letting the lawman set the pace. Doc went first. Clara May stayed close. And this time she didn't need the coat to hide in, only the promise that someone would finally listen. The marshal told him he was not free. Not yet. But he was not done either. They moved quiet through the back. Not fast, not loud, taking side streets while Dodge City slept. The forge sat ahead, dark and still, like a mouth that had already swallowed too many secrets. Clara May walked with them, coat tight around her shoulders, jaw set. She did not look back. The blacksmith shop looked different at dawn, meaner somehow. The forge was cold, but the smell of iron never left. In the early light, it felt less like a fight was coming, and more like a truth was about to be dug up. Tools hung where they always did. Patient, waiting. The marshal told Owen to stay near the door. He told Clara May to keep close to him. They did not need long behind the anvil. Under loose boards, they found more. Another brand head, then another. Different marks, different ranches, and a ledger. Not neat, not official, just numbers and lines and names scratched by a hand that knew what it was doing. Dates, routes, sales. And there were names in there that did not belong in a blacksmith shop. Wright, the saloon man who always bought cheap beef and never asked why it was cheap. Baxter, the ranch kid with a clean shirt and a dirty grin, the one folks joked about but never challenged. That was why Silas had looked so sure of himself. He wasn't just a blacksmith, he was a link in a chain. And chains don't scare you because they're loud. They scare you because they're quiet. And they hold more than one man. The marshal exhaled slow. He'd come early to light the forge, because a blacksmith who wanted to look innocent always made sure folks saw him working. That was when Silas Crow's voice filled the shop. He asked what everyone was doing in his place of work. Silas stood in the doorway with his sleeves rolled up and his hammer hanging loose in one hand. He looked surprised, then annoyed, then angry, but still calm. He said his wife should be at home. He said the marshal had no right. He said Owen had no business breathing free air. A couple of early risers drifted in first, then a few more, pulled by the sight of law at the blacksmith shop. Even half awake, People could smell trouble. Silas stepped forward, and the hammer came up a little higher. Owen moved without thinking. He did not rush Silas. He shifted sideways, putting the anvil between them, keeping space, keeping balance. He had fought before, not for pride, for survival. Silas swung. The hammer cracked against iron and sent a jolt through the room. Sparks jumped. Owen ducked, grabbed a length of chain from the wall and wrapped it once around his forearm, not to trap, to block. Silas swung again, wild now, the calm cracking. Owen caught the handle with the chain and yanked hard, twisting Silas off balance. The hammer hit the floor. The fight did not last long. It never does when truth is heavy and lies are tired. Silas went down hard against the forge, breath knocked out of him, anger replaced by panic. The marshal stepped in then, gun drawn, voice steady and loud enough for the crowd outside to hear. He said it was over. Silas shouted that it was a setup, that his wife was lying, that Owen was the real thief. No one listened, because the ledger was open on the anvil, because the brand heads were lined up where everyone could see them, because a few men in the crowd recognized marks they had questioned but never challenged. The mood shifted. Not relief. Not yet. Something hotter. The same anger that had wanted Owen's blood now turned. Men stepped back from Silas. Faces hardened. Trust broke. The marshal ordered Silas taken in chains. As they dragged him past the crowd, Silas twisted and looked at Owen one last time. There was no rage left in his eyes, only shock. The kind a man feels when he realizes the town he thought he owned had just decided otherwise. Clara May stood beside Owen, not touching him, not needing to. She was breathing free air. The marshal told the crowd to go home. He told them this would be handled by law, not rope. Law is slow, and it frustrates people. But rope is fast, and it turns decent men into monsters. Some listened, some did not like it, but they did not move. Not yet. As Silas disappeared into the jail, Owen felt the weight of the day settle into his bones. He knew better than to think this was done, because towns do not forgive fast. And men do not forget the feeling of wanting to be right. The marshal leaned close and spoke low. He said the truth had teeth, but it still needed time to bite. Then he looked past Owen, out toward the dark edge of town, and his voice dropped. He said the night was not finished yet, because Silas Crow had not been working alone, and whoever stood behind him was about to realize how close they were to being exposed. It didn't end with cheers. It ended the way most hard days do, quiet and heavy, with people walking home thinking about what they almost did instead of what they actually did. Silas Crow sat behind bars now, staring at iron instead of shaping it. The men who had shouted loudest drifted away first, eyes down, hands busy with nothing. Anger burns fast, but shame burns slow, and Dodge City was starting to feel both. Owen stood outside the jail with Clara May, the heat of the day finally easing from the air. Neither of them spoke for a while. They did not need to. She was no longer tied to a fence, but she was still untangling herself from something tighter than rope. He was no longer accused, but he could still feel the mark of it on his back, the way a brand stays sore long after the iron lifts. Marshal Harper did his job. He locked the doors, posted guards, and promised an investigation that would follow the law instead of the crowd. It was not perfect. It was not fast. But it was enough for now. Clara May looked toward the edge of town where the lights thinned and the land opened up. For the first time, she was not looking for a way to hide. She was looking for a way forward. Owen offered her a choice, not a plan. He said she could stay where she was under the protection of the marshal and the dock and build something new on her own time. Or she could come out to his place for a while, work when she was ready, rest when she was not, and decide later what she wanted her life to look like. He did not reach for her. He did not promise anything he could not keep. That mattered more than words. She chose the morning, not the answer. She said she would think on it, and that was enough. By the time the stars came out, the town had settled into an uneasy sleep. Truth had won, but not clean. It never does. Owen rode out early the next day, alone, dust rising behind him. He did not look back at Dodge City right away. He had learned that some places only make sense once you have put distance between you and them. Clara May watched the sun climb from the porch of the doc's place, wrapped in a borrowed coat, breathing like someone who had been holding her breath for years. Their story did not end with a kiss or a speech. It ended with something quieter and harder: respect. And if you have lived long enough, you know how rare that can be. I want to step out of the story for a moment here, man to man. I have lived long enough to see how fast people judge and how slow they apologize. I have also learned that doing the right thing does not always protect you, but not doing it will cost you something you never get back. This story stuck with me because it reminds me how thin the line is between being seen as decent and being destroyed by a lie. There are a few lessons worth carrying out of Dodge City. The first is this: truth does not shout, it waits. If you are the kind of man who needs noise to feel right, you will miss it every time. But if you stay steady, if you keep your hands clean even when the world is not, truth has a way of showing up when it matters most. The second lesson is harder. Helping someone can cost you. It can cost your reputation, your safety, and even your freedom for a while. But the cost of walking past a wrong thing is something you pay every day after, and the interest never stops. And maybe the most important lesson is about choice. Clara May was not saved by Owen alone. She saved herself the moment she stopped believing the rope defined her. Owen did not rescue her future. He respected it. Ask yourself this: when you see someone at their lowest, do you rush to judge the picture or do you wait to learn the story? When the crowd starts leaning one way, do you lean with it or do you plant your feet and ask why? And when doing the right thing puts you in a bad light, do you still do it? Those are not old questions. They are daily ones. If this story made you think, if it slowed you down even a little, take a second and let me know by leaving a like. It helps this channel reach the people who still value stories with weight and meaning. And if you want more stories like this, about hard choices, quiet courage, and lives shaped by small moments, consider subscribing so you do not miss the next one. We live in a loud world now. Everyone wants to be right. Very few want to be fair. But every once in a while, a man makes a choice in the heat and dust that reminds us who we are supposed to be. And sometimes that's enough to change the direction of a life. So I will leave you with this. If you were standing there at that fence and the whole town was watching, would you still reach out to cut the rope?